Hello everybody, my name's Susan and I actually work for Durham Community Action, which is a charity which supports other charities with information, advice and guidance. However, I also work for Communities Can and contracted to them, and Communities Can is an enabling community-led housing hub. So I'm going to give a brief introduction to community-led housing. And I could tell from the chat at the very beginning, this is very common. It's a subject that not many people are aware of. They don't understand what it is. They don't even really appreciate that it exists. But actually, there's some really good and interesting projects all over the country, and they're doing incredibly well. Sometimes they've done well where the private sector's failed. Sometimes they've done well where the local authorities failed. Sometimes they work hand in hand with the local authority. As we say, we've got Andrea on today. I found South Tyneside very supportive. The key thing about it is, though, it's not driven by profit, and it's designed by people that care for the community. So that sounds like it sits very much with the ethos of your group. So Communities Can actually covers 7 local authorities. They've all signed up to a commitment to support community-led housing in their area, and it's the 7 usual suspects that you'd expect in this area of the local authorities. Now that covers 40 projects, one of which at the moment is in South Tyneside. I think Durham and Northumberland are leading the way, but you'd expect that because the bigger councils. And it actually represents 550 community homes. And the key thing to think about when you're thinking about community-led housing is the government currently has an agenda to, you've heard it, build, build, build. And community-led housing just gives communities a chance to think about what that might look like and input into the designs, and with the aim of to create an inspiring place to live, a bit more diversity in the housing stock. And a key part of it is to create a sense of community for where people live. So people often ask, well, what is community-led housing? How would you define it? Well, although I said it's a relatively new way, it has been around for about 20 years, and it's seen quite a significant growth. And the reason for that is there's been quite a lot of government support available up until the pandemic, at which point it has fallen through the force slightly, but we do feel like that will change again in the future, although it's a little bit of a barren period as far as funding is concerned at the moment. The definition is it's set up by local people to address a housing need in their community. So whatever they identify that need might be for older people, for accessible housing, it might be family housing. I'll give some examples as we go along, but it's very much, it's not social housing, it's not for profit, and it is run by volunteers who would manage it. They become a legal entity, like you guys were talking about before, and the Citizens Assembly may be a legal entity. So you'd be a legal entity in your own right, but this is not for profit, and it is not a situation where people would get paid. And it does take an awful lot of time, I have to add, but then that's the same for any voluntary project. So we have the Enabling Hub that we set up. It as Drew introduced as Community Homes on the Map, but has just this month changed its name to Communities Can. So there you go, I had to change all the logos. Now, the hub was set up so that there was a legal body that could draw down funds that could then be spent in the local area. And we were set up so that we could give advice to people how to set up community-led housing groups. We'll help you find the right people. So if at the moment I've got one person in Stanley who wants to do a co-housing project, and I'm working with him to align his vision so that we've got something that we could sell and market, and then to engage with local people who might be interested in joining that project. That's the type of help that we would give. A big one is always to help access funding. That's always, you know, top of the list for any voluntary group. And we'll also link people into partners and advice and the local authority as and where it's needed. So here we go with a sort of whistle-stop tour of what type of housing could be involved in community-led housing. Top of the list is affordable housing. And the definition of affordable is 80% of the market rent, whether that's to buy, whether it's shared ownership, or whether that's to rent. It's 80% of the market value. And it can only be affordable if you attract in public funding very often to be able to make the difference between the market rent and the other rent. So affordable is top of the list. You've got lots of places where people have to move out the area because they can't afford to live there. Rural economies very often, the housing, particularly during the pandemic, people have wanted to move out the cities. So affordable housing is always top of the list for community-led housing. Doesn't have to be. There is some business models where the housing is the rental value is not the priority of why the group was set up. It might have been set up to address antisocial behaviour in an area, or older people's housing, which is next on the list there, interestingly. And again, through the pandemic, people have become very aware of their own well-being and not wanting to be isolated and worry about maybe what might happen in older age. There's a brilliant project, there's a video online from an organisation called OWCH, OWCH, a ladies, older people's housing, community-led housing group who've built a co-housing scheme, which is everybody has an individual flat, and then there is also communal shared space. And boy, if that was round here, I would love to live there because it looks really jolly and a lovely place to live. And when you watch it, you think, why are we not doing more of this? It just looks fantastic. Family housing is a big one because there's not a lot of larger houses. We're working with, we have a Jewish group in Gateshead, and they've been very successful in building, because they live with their extended family, their housing needs are different. So they're wanting to build 4-bedroom houses, and they've made a fantastic progress with the family housing projects. Accessible housing, this is all this, you know, whether that's just bungalows for older people with, you know, ramps or low entry points and wider doors, or we've also got one for actually housing for people who have more severe disabilities. We have a project that's specifically trying to design houses from the outset that are designed for people with disabilities, because changing the design of the house once it's built and making the doors wider or putting wet rooms in is quite expensive and difficult. So they're setting out as a group in Bishop Auckland that's building houses for adults with disabilities, young adults, leaving the parents' home and wanting somewhere suitable to live. Co-housing we've talked about there, that's quite common in community-led housing. A group of people get together, they have their own house, their own unit to live in, but they have also shared facilities, shared gardens, a shared kitchen, maybe space where they come together, community rooms. Empty homes projects, these are quite common. Or it could also be in an area where you have poor quality private rented houses, that community groups have been seen to come together to purchase these type of houses, improve the quality of them, and then rent or sell them on to the local community. And there's always something written into the deeds. So if public money has been used to to do these schemes, then it's always written into the houses deeds that it stays with the community for perpetuity. So you can sell it, but you can only ever sell it at the rent or with the certain covenants that have been agreed at the beginning or written in at the very beginning to the deeds. And I've popped in there high street regeneration projects because when I talk to Drew, and I know I've talked to Andrea about what are the issues sometimes in different areas, I try to always link this talk to what might be particular problems in certain areas. Then high street regeneration, there's not many people who don't have that on the list. So I've popped it in because at the end I'll give an example of a really good project who's fairly close to you guys, you know, close enough to visit if you wanted to, and just to give an example of what's been done. So very, very quickly, the benefits of community-led housing. If we're doing the affordable housing, it's a long-term supply of homes that people can afford. As I said, it's written into the deeds, so that affordability element has to be maintained in perpetuity. Community-led housing can use smaller sites, it can use up empty buildings. I would say that every scheme I've seen has been better designed. Most people that care about their community care about their environment, so they're going for passive house, carbon friendly type designs, and they're matching the homes to the people. People have a say in what gets built and where. There's no community housing scheme that will go ahead without some type of form of community consultation, because that's how you're able to draw down the funds. Often groups that run community-led housing also run other services, so a community shop, a community pub, and we've got one later on that has art and exhibition space. There's another one of the examples that are used that's running a food bank and community centre. So they're very much rooted into the communities, and they're built by people who care. So they care about the community, they're interested in what people might say, and they're not built for profit, which takes that element out of it straight away. So we've got Andrea on the call today, but I'll cover this slide on behalf of Andrea and the support that you get from South Tyneside Local Authority, which I have to say Andrea has been fantastic. You know, we went round all the CAF meetings and tried to highlight what was available to the local councillors, and Andrea was always there. She's always been a port of call for me, so I've got one point of contact in the local authority. But the local authority is far more useful than me to help groups when they're looking to acquire council-owned land and buildings and what might be available or possible. They help groups locate suitable sites. They'll work internally with the planning department so that that can help save time and money to a community group. They'll liaise internally with all the mysteries of what happens when it goes to planning and highways and the other departments, and they will do that on behalf of the community-led housing group, which is a huge benefit, because this can become quite a technical subject. So having a friend that you can call in the local authority that's going to support and understand your group is very, very useful. Now, I've just put this picture in here because quite often when I start talking about it, people think that community-led housing is going to be some tin hut, you know, and it's not like that at all. It's the complete opposite. They're the most beautifully designed homes and most desirable places to live that I've ever seen. They're incredible. They look beautiful. I wish we had more like this in our area. So I just wanted to use this slide to inspire anybody. You know, start having a look around on the internet, see what's available, because it is amazing what's been achieved. There's a real community-led housing movement going on that you know, up until last year, I wasn't even aware of. So this is one of the examples I wanted to leave you with, and this is back on the map in Hendon. Now, Hendon is an area where it had a lot of empty houses and a lot of very poor quality private rented sector houses. Now, in fairness, back on the map did stop 20 years ago, but they now own or manage on behalf of other landlords around about 80 to 100 houses. I'm never quite sure of the number, so it's high 80s, I think, which is unbelievable. They have their own little sort of estates office where you can go in and have a look at houses and that they have, and they go above and beyond what a decent home standard is. So they do charge the market rent. Their business model's not affordable, because what they do is they put the money back into the community. So they run a community centre, they pay for the community centre staff, they run a food bank, they manage these properties and provide people with supported tenancies. So for them, the affordable rent model didn't work, because they needed to make sure there's sufficient income come in to maintain the houses and to maintain all these vital services, which particularly over the last year has been, again, they've made an incredible effort in Sunderland, and they've really changed. I mean, it's only a small area, but they've really changed this area from being derelict and burnt out cars and, you know, houses going to rack and ruin. It's actually now quite a pleasant place to live. So, you know, that one is an absolutely great example. And some of these, you know, Drew, when you come out of lockdown, if people want to visit, then, you know, all of these housing groups are more than welcome to people who want to go and actually have a look around. Now, the last example that I've chosen to leave you with of a community-led housing project is the Glendale Gateway Trust in Woolley. And they have some real challenges with the rural economy, with employment, with housing, with well-being for people. A big lack of affordable housing, a lot of derelict houses, buildings, sorry, not housing, but buildings on the high street. And the local authority and private sector over the last 20 years had, or even going back further, had tried to address these issues, and it hadn't really worked. There was some buildings that have been bought up by people who wanted to keep them in their own pension portfolios, but they did nothing with them. So they just sat there on the high street and looked awful. So Glendale Gateway Trust, again, over about 20 years, they now own and manage 20 affordable homes of their own. They've got their own community hub, which is very similar to a community centre, but just with a few more services that sit within it. They actually saved the local youth hostel. They came together, they used money that was coming in from the houses to support the projects, and they've bought some buildings on the local high street, and they've got flats above, and underneath they've got a cafe with exhibition space. And the key thing about this model is that it's sustainable. So they've set up and developed this, and it's paying for itself from the income that comes in from the housing. And that's the beauty of the model. It's not always the reason why people do things, but particularly the Glendale Gateway Trust, this is a really fantastic model. And again, it's Woolley. So, you know, Drew, if you want someone from Glendale Gateway Trust to come and give you a more in-depth talk about what they do, I can put you in touch with the relevant people. If you want to do a day trip up there at one stage, I'd be interested to come with you, because it just looks incredible. And I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to open the floor now to questions. So on this presentation, just at the end, there's my contact details on here. So, you know, if anybody wants to get in touch after the meeting, then feel free. That's my email and my telephone, and either way works really well. So I'll stop sharing the screen now,